Do it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our first ever virtual Living with Intention. I'm Judy Schlossberg, and I'm the Women's Philanthropy Chair at the Jewish Federation of Greater Hartford. It's so great to see all of you face to face, which unfortunately or fortunately has become our new normal. While I introduce our first speaker, just take a minute, though we were just doing it, to scroll through and look at all the wonderful women who are on our call tonight. There are more than 130 people, almost 140, I think I heard.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to introduce David Warren, our Federation's president and CEO, to say hello. David.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Judy, for your leadership and helping to organize this incredible program tonight. Tonight's topic, of course, could not be more relevant. The past few months have been trying times for all of us. Caring for others and ensuring our own health, physical and psychological, is crucial as we seek to emerge from this pandemic stronger than ever. At Federation, our first responsibility during this crisis, before anything else, has been to ensure that core social service needs are met. Along with our key partners at the Jewish Foundation and Jewish Family Services, we've already provided and are now funding thousands of meals to those in crisis, as well as financial assistance. Jewish Family Services is one of the largest beneficiary agencies of the Federation, receiving about $250,000 a year to support outstanding behavioral health counseling and many other programs. This work and aid is only possible because of your ongoing support. As some of you know, our friend Ann Danaher is retiring as CEO of JFS after 33 years of service. And next week, Katie Hanley will officially succeed her. JFS board president Pia Rosenberg-Toro will become chair of the board and hand over the presidency to Lisa Berman. Ann, it has been such a pleasure working with you. We wish you only health and only happiness in this new chapter in your life. Pia, Katie, and Lisa, we look forward to many, many more years of partnership. Together, I'm confident that we will meet the core needs in this community, and we will ensure a vibrant future for this amazing community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. It's hard to believe that Rabbi Ilana Garber has served Bethel Temple in West Hartford for just shy of 15 years. But it's even harder to believe that she gave her last official sermon at Bethel just over a week ago. In July, Rabbi will start a new position as Director of Global Rabbinic Development for the Rabbinical Assembly, the International Association of Conservative Rabbis. She'll actually be the rabbi's rabbi, providing spiritual direction and counseling for conservative rabbis all around the world, developing continuing education programs and supporting rabbis and congregations during leadership transitions. It's a big job, and they couldn't have chosen a better person to do it. The silver lining for us is that Rabbi Garber and her family will still be living in our community. Rabbi Garber has spoken at several of our other Living with Intention events, and it's so nice to welcome her back today to share with us a Devar Torah and lead us in the She'ekiyanu. Rabbi Garber.
Thank you, Judy, for that beautiful introduction. I'm honored to be here Zooming with you all tonight. It's incredible to see so many amazing women who care about our Jewish community, who have journeyed together on a path of exploration and commitment, and who have inspired me to keep learning and teaching. How I wish we could be together in person tonight. I'd give you all a big old New England hug. I want to invite 5 women who are not here on this Zoom to join us as well on this Rosh Chodesh, the new Hebrew month of Tammuz. They are Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milka, and Tirza, the 5 brave daughters of a man named Slabchad. We'll read their story in a few weeks in the Torah portion Pinchas, but I wanted to bring them here tonight as we begin the month in which they are mentioned, because their willingness to speak up and their understanding of the power of sisterhood is what led to so many of the liberations in our tradition and the freedoms in our lives today as Jewish women. When Moses was assigning everyone's inheritance in the promised land, the land of Canaan, Zelophehad's daughters realized that because their father had died without leaving a male heir to inherit his portion of the land, they wouldn't have any land of their own. They approached Moses, demanding their fair share of land. In the end, God approves of the daughters' claims, commands that Zelophehad's land be transferred to them, and institutes a new law. If a man dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his land to his daughters. Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah remind us of the many Jewish women, past and present, who have joined together to instigate, lead, and ultimately win battles for women's rights. As we join together tonight, we pray that their example inspires us to organize to fight injustice everywhere and for everyone. As we continue our living with intention, may it be our intention that we live, truly live, in health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, so that we may continue to help those in need. The Shehechianu prayer is usually recited for something new or to express our gratitude for reaching this day. So take a moment, please, to set your own intention. In these days of monotony, homeschooling, remote work, social distancing, and more, what are you grateful for? What is new and exciting or special and holy for you right now? Let us honor each other as we celebrate the good and the sacred, sharing our gratitude together with the words of Shehechianu. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Garber, and that's why one of the many reasons we're going to miss you so much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and my partner at the Jewish Federation, Dana Keller, and our guest speaker, Lori Gottlieb. Many of you know Dana already. She was our Women's Philanthropy Chair, and now she's the chair of Federation's annual campaign, which, as you all know, supports so many of the Jewish programs and services that make Greater Hartford a truly great place to live. She also co-chairs the Development Committee for the Jewish Hartford Rapid Relief and Recovery Fund, which is well on its way, just under, to raising $1 million for coronavirus relief in our community. Dana will be interviewing Lori tonight about her work as a psychotherapist, her most recent book, and how therapy can help us live with intention. Dana started her career in local television news in DC, but we already know she's a pro interviewer because we saw her in action with Jessica Ebo in last year's Living with Intention, where we all met in person for one of the last times for a while. We are so delighted to have Lori Gottlieb with us tonight. Lori is joining us all the way from Los Angeles, where she has a clinical practice and writes the Atlantic's weekly Dear Therapist advice column. She contributes regularly to the New York Times and many other publications. And her recent TED Talk is one of the top 10 most watched of the year. Lori's new iHeartRadio podcast, Dear Therapist, produced by Katie Couric, will premiere later this year. And her latest book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, is being turned into an ABC TV series starring Eva Longoria. Wow. Lori is whip smart, and she has so much insight on human nature, the stories we tell ourselves, and how we can change our lives by changing our stories. Please welcome with me Dana Keller and Lori Gottlieb.
Hi, everybody. So let me just give you a few logistics before we start the interview. First of all, thank you, Lori, for being here tonight, and thank you, Judy, for the introduction. I'm going to interview Lori for about a half an hour, and then Lori will take your questions. As you think of the questions, there's a chat button at the bottom of your screen, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with on Zoom. Just put your question in there, and we will go through those questions. There might be some similar ones, and then we will ask them of Lori after we're through with the interview. If you're on a mobile device, tap your screen so you can see the control bar, and then tap on participants, and then tap on chat. So it should be that easy, and we're gonna get right started. If you want, you can put up speaker view on your phone so you don't look at everybody, or you can keep it this way, however is comfortable for you. So first off, Lori, I wanted to know, wait, first Bill's gonna mute everybody but me and Lori. That's the first. Let's wait for that to happen. Judy's still not muted. Judy Schlossberg is not muted. Okay, good, perfect. Lori, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm very excited for this, and I loved your book, and I'm just so honored to be able to interview you tonight.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you, Dana, for interviewing me and having this conversation with me. And I'm so glad to be here with this wonderful group of women.
Thank you. First off, I just wanted to know how you're doing. You know, it's been a long quarantine. We're kind of just getting out here in Connecticut. I know California got out a little earlier than we did. I'm just wondering how your role as a psychotherapist impacted the dynamic of the quarantine with you and your son at this moment in time.
Yeah, you know, I've written so much about, you know, what it's like dealing with this experience that we're all sharing, and yet I think we all have our unique reactions to it. So it's probably the first time that everybody has the same external stressor, and then how do we react to it might be different. And two of the things that I think I like to talk about are, first of all, this idea of the both and. And what I mean by that is, you asked, how am I doing with my son? When this started back in March, and all of a sudden he was doing remote learning and he was home, you know, I had this very mixed reaction to it. And part of it was, my son is 14, and as a 14-year-old boy, I don't get to hear a lot about his life in the way that I used to. And when he's home, he talks to me all the time, and you see it, it's happening, like school is happening right there in your house. And so while I would, if I could snap my fingers and make the coronavirus go away, of course I would. But I think the both and is that there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of anxiety, there's all of that going on. And it's really a delight to be able to see more of my child. So I think we all have the both and in this situation, which is, you know, this situation has been incredibly challenging on so many levels. And at the same time, a lot of people are saying, well, I'm really glad I don't have to commute to work an hour and a half every day. Or I have more time to have this really long conversation on FaceTime with my friend, or I'm getting out more and I'm taking more walks, or I don't have to put on makeup, or, you know, even if it's something as seemingly trivial as that. So I think the both and of the situation is really important. We feel so guilty if we experience any joy in a time of great challenge. And it reminds me a little bit of this woman I was treating for cancer. And she said everybody was sort of tiptoeing around her, like they couldn't have fun around her because they thought it would minimize her suffering. And she said, no, both are true. Life is going on and I'm suffering, right? So I think that as we look at our lives right now, it's important to say, you know, it's okay. There's no hierarchy of grief. You're experiencing some joy doesn't take away from somebody else's discomfort, suffering, any of that. And so I think it's okay to feel both, and we should. That's sort of the part, you know, the spectrum of the human condition.
I like that. You feel joy while being challenged and during grief. Like, I like that. It's all about, you know, even it's sometimes you feel guilty feeling joyous when, you know, you have a home, you have food on the table, and so many people have lost their jobs, but you also have your family with you and you're safe. So you feel kind of guilty admitting that in some ways.
Yeah, it's not the grief Olympics. There's no contest. And I think we compare our grief, just like in normal times, we compare our pain, right? So I always say, like in the book, I say there's no hierarchy of pain. And that's a lot of the time they use the same reasoning you just did. Like, I have a roof over my head and food on the table. So if I'm experiencing some emotional discomfort, well, other people have it worse. So I'm not going to go get help for it, right? That's why people don't come to therapy until things get really bad, because of this comparison, this hierarchy of pain, this hierarchy of grief, this hierarchy of sadness. And I think that's really a dangerous way to look at our emotional health.
And explain what that hierarchy of pain kind of looks like. Like what does it mean exactly?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, think about it in terms of our physical health. We don't do that with our physical health. So for example, if you feel some discomfort in your chest, you're probably going to go see a cardiologist before you have a massive coronary, right? You'll get it checked out. You're not going to say, oh, it's nothing, I'm just going to forget about that. But if you feel some emotional discomfort, what happens is you say, this sadness, this anxiety, these relational difficulties, that, this loss, whatever it is, compared to, and we'll compare it to somebody who has it seemingly far more challenging, and probably in reality more challenging, right? And we say, well, so I don't really need to go get this checked out. We don't do that with our physical health. We don't say, well, somebody else has cancer, so I'm not going to go to the cardiologist for my chest pain. We don't compare, but we do compare when it comes to emotional health. And so what happens is people don't come to see me as a therapist until they're experiencing the equivalent of an emotional heart attack. And the problem with that is that they've been experiencing this suffering for a long period of time when they didn't need to. And they came to me at a point when it's harder to treat, because now we have to kind of backtrack. Now they're in a crisis. So it's really interesting how we look at the difference between our physical health and our emotional health.
Yeah. That makes sense. That hierarchy. I have to remember that. Why did you choose to include yourself in such a revealing way in your book? Were you afraid to reveal so much of yourself in the book, and maybe giving your patients a chance, they might read it and see you for the person, not the therapist?
Yeah. So for the people who haven't read the book, it's called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And it is about, in the book, I follow 4 very seemingly different patients as they go through their own struggles. And then there's a 5th patient in the book, who is me, as I go through my own struggle and I go to my own therapist. So you're seeing sort of the human condition from the point of view of the clinician, and also the point of view of just a person in the world. And I say at the very beginning of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone that my most significant credential is that I'm a card-carrying member of the human race. And so I didn't want to just follow the 4 people, because I felt like that was almost disingenuous. If they were going to be that vulnerable, why wouldn't I? Because really, we're all more the same than we are different. And I think that's what the reader discovers as they read the book, is even if at the beginning people say, and I did this purposely, like if you look at the people in the beginning, people might say, I'm not like that person at all. And yet as you read the book, you realize, oh, wow, I'm like all of these people in different ways. And in terms of revealing myself, it's funny because in the book, I write about how I was supposed to be writing a book about helicopter parenting, because I'd written this piece for The Atlantic called How to Land Your Kid in Therapy, Why Our Obsession with Our Kids' Happiness Might Be Dooming Them to Unhappy Adulthoods. That went viral and publishers wanted me to write that book. I didn't want to write that book. As the New Yorker said at the time, or a little bit after that time, they said another parenting book would just be cruel, because it was sort of like you want parents to relax, but you're giving them all these books. So then I said, I'm really interested in what's happening with the adults. And they said, oh, you want to write a happiness book? And I said, no, I don't want to write a happiness book. But it ended up being that they wanted me to write a happiness book. And so I felt like I was starting out as a new therapist at the time. And I felt like what I was seeing in the therapy room was so much richer and deeper, and much more relevant to our lives than a book about happiness. And so I ended up canceling the happiness book. It made me depressed, actually. I called it the miserable depression-inducing happiness book.
Yeah, that's bad.
It was, I felt it didn't feel meaningful to me the way that this book did. And so when I was going to write this book, everybody said, oh, nobody's going to read this book. It's not commercial, whatever that means. Now we're, over a year on the New York Times bestseller list. So a lot of people are reading this book. And I think that the reason that they're reading it is because I was so authentic and real. I remember when I turned it into my publisher after everybody said, oh, no one's going to read this. And I turned in the first draft and everybody started passing it around and saying, I laughed, I cried, I saw myself, I saw, everybody in my life. And people were like, oh, people are going to read this. And I thought, well, maybe, 300 or 3,000 people will read it instead of the 3 people I thought. But, I had this moment of thinking maybe I should clean myself up a little bit, more people are going to read it. But I'm really glad I didn't, because I think that the reason that, again, so many people have read it and it's been going so strong for over a year now is because I was so relatable. I didn't try to keep the mask on. I didn't try to hide behind my professional veneer. I was just a person in the world like everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's what resonates. I think there's a lot of women on this call who have book clubs that have read it or are reading it now. And so they're all excited to listen to you. I think you're being authentic like that was why people enjoyed it so much. Can you tell me about the patients in the book? Like you said, there's 4 patients and you're the 5th. Did you have a favorite, and were they actual patients or were they a conglomerate of a few molded into one?
Yeah, that's so funny, that question about favorites. It's almost like, who's your favorite child, right? None.
I was just curious.
No, I love that question because I think people are curious about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that they all moved me in different ways. And I think that it's interesting because when you're a therapist, obviously you're not doing your therapy in the room with these people, but you can't help but have them hold up a mirror to you and have them make you ask questions about your life that they're asking about their own lives. You can't help but not examine your life more deeply when you're and so I think with briefly, the 4 patients are there was, by the way, I just lost you. I don't know if you can still see me because you are.
Do you see me?
Okay,
I see you.
now I can. There you go.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So you first meet John, and he's this very, this sort of guy about 40 years old, and he is very insulting to me. Some might say that he has narcissistic traits. I think we all know a John in our lives. And he seems very unlikable at the beginning. And as you get to know him, and his whole thing is, I think that we reveal things about ourselves through our behavior. We speak the unspeakable through our behavior, and his need to kind of protect his pain by keeping people at bay, by keeping them at a distance. I knew there was something going on. Of course, I had no idea what it was. And I think when people find out what it was, they're as shocked as I was when I found out. And I really bring people into that experience of going through the sessions the way I did. And I think, when you ask about a favorite, I think for a lot of people, he becomes the favorite of so many people who have read the book. There's Julie, who's this young woman who is in her 30s. She just got back from her honeymoon, and she sort of has everything in her life that she ever wanted in terms of professionally and personally, romantically, all of that. And she comes back, she thinks she might be pregnant because she feels something a little bit funky in her breast, and turns out it's breast cancer. And she ends up going through this period of they say it's very treatable, and it is very treatable. And then, she ends her treatment with me. And then 6 months later, she gets her sign-off scan to get pregnant, and they find another different cancer. And it's a very rare, aggressive form of cancer that's going to kill her. And they don't know if it's 1 year or 10 years. And so she wants me to stay with her until she dies. And it's about our experience of going through that together. By the way, I lost you again. I don't know if you're there.
I'm really sorry. I see you.
There we go. Okay. All right. There you go.
It's like live TV. You never know when it's going to go away.
Right. And then there's Rita, who's about to turn 70, and she has 4 adult children who are estranged from her. They won't talk to her because of how she was as a mother to them and what their grievances are with her as a mother. And even though maybe some of us haven't had those same experiences, I think we all have those experiences of feeling like we made mistakes as parents, and how do our kids respond to them? And what does it even mean to forgive? What does it mean to have regret? How do we deal with our regret? And her story is really about her being very alone in the world. She's divorced. Her kids don't talk to her. And how can, is it ever too late? Is it ever too late to start over? Is it ever too late to create the kind of life that you want. And I think Rita's story shows us that it's not. And I think her story is surprising in so many ways and yet typical in so many ways. And I think that's why it's important to see somebody kind of reinvent themselves and when they're brave enough to do the work, even if they're about to turn 70. And the last person is Charlotte, who's on the other end of the age spectrum, and she's in her 20s and she keeps dating the wrong guys, and she can't understand why she keeps getting disappointed by men. And a lot of it has to do with something that she's working out. And I think that relates to a lot of us in terms of what are these blind spots that we have? What are these patterns? You know, I talk in the book about the difference between idiot compassion and wise compassion. And idiot compassion is what our friends do. So we tell them a story like, this happened, my partner did this, or my, you know, my boss did this, or my coworker, my friend, my sibling, whatever. And we say, yeah, they're terrible. You're right. You know, that's so terrible that happened. That's idiot compassion. We take their
That's why we have friends like that.
Well, right. But it doesn't really help, right? Because you realize that they're sort of telling you the same story, different characters, different situation a lot. And it's kind of like what we don't say to them is, if a fight breaks out in every bar you're going to, maybe it's you. We never say that. But they would learn a lot from that. In therapy, we offer wise compassion. We hold up a mirror to people and help them to see something about themselves that maybe they aren't willing or able to see, right? And so the thing with Charlotte, this young woman in her 20s, is she's not able to see her own role in the situation. And what she is, she's able to move forward and have a different kind of relationship.
And were these patients, or I don't know, patients, were they a combination of some of your patients, or were they totally a fictional character in your narrative? Like, how did you come up with these characters?
Yeah, they're real people. And I think that's what makes it, I think, more resonant, because I think that the real stories are often, it's kind of like truth is stranger than fiction. I think
it seemed real to me. I just was curious. Like their stories came out of the page. I could visualize them.
Yeah.
I assumed they were real.
Yeah, they're real. I had to change anything that can make them identifiable, which in this age of Google was no small task.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it worked out, and I think that you know, and they're very happy. I mean, the people in the book, I didn't show it to them beforehand. I got their permissions, but I didn't show it to them. And I think that it was interesting because afterwards they all said to me in different ways. They said, I knew that you cared so I didn't write about anyone I was currently seeing because I felt like those lines were too blurred. And so they said, you know, I knew that you cared about me, but reading the book, it was a whole new level of that. And so
it made you feel so good.
It did. Yeah. I think it was a really great experience for all of us.
When you were talking about the character Charlotte, you talked about how we are unreliable narratives in the book. You talked about that, and you talked about how we get stuck, and how we can't receive our full potential when we limit ourselves. How stuck? Like, how do we, if we think we should go to therapy and we get there when we should have gone 6 months ago when the heart attack was really bad, how do we talk to the therapist to really get help? Like, is it, I mean, it's a two-way thing, the therapist and the patient, but how does the patient really get unstuck in that chair, in that office every week?
Yeah. So yeah, we are unreliable narrators and we don't realize it, and we're not doing it on purpose. This is the recent TED Talk that I did is sort of like a 15-minute version of a main theme in the book, which is about how our stories that we tell ourselves keep us stuck, and we don't realize that we have these faulty narratives. So because I have a writing background, I feel like in a lot of ways as a therapist, my job sitting in that therapist chair is that of an editor, where I am helping people when they come in. I just lost you again.
I know, it's doing that. I don't know what it is.
I don't know why.
As long as you say it again, that's okay.
Yes. Oh, you left. Hold on.
I think sometimes the people aren't on mute, and the speaker view comes with people talking. So Bill, can you make sure everyone is still on mute? Because some people, I'm hearing feedback from a little child. I don't know that would be good if we could have that in real life, you know? Click.
Oh, there you go again. Lost you.
Okay.
Okay, there you are. It's Corona Verite. We'll roll with it.
Yes.
Yes. So I think what happens is people come in and they tell you a story, and they don't realize that there's so much that they're emphasizing because they want me to hear the story in a particular way, or they're minimizing, or you know, who are the heroes and who are the victims and who are the supporting characters, and you know, is the protagonist moving forward or is the protagonist going in circles, right? And so I think all of those, that's all of what the editing is of therapy, is really getting clear. And we don't realize that we carry around these stories in our heads, like, I can't trust anyone, or I'm unlovable, or nothing will ever work out for me, or whatever the story is, right? Nobody understands me. You know, it could be anything. And that sometimes these stories are historical stories. They're very old stories that we're still carrying around as adults, but they color every interaction that we have. And so, and I also think that they affect, so now I'm seeing somebody walking.
Yeah. She's back on
Okay,
mute.
there we
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I think what happens is, you know, those stories are like a bad radio station that's playing in our heads. And what happens is we are so unkind to ourselves, and we don't realize how unkind we are, how these stories are just being told to us by ourselves all day long. When I do public speaking in real life, when I'm on a stage and I have a big room full of people, and I'll say, who's the person that you talk to most in the course of your life? And most people raise their hands when they say, like, oh, it's my spouse, it's my sister, it's my best friend, right? It's my mom, whatever it is. But no, the person that you talk to most in the course of your life is you.
Right.
And what we say to ourselves isn't always kind or true or helpful. It doesn't meet any of those three criteria. And so what I did was, I had this patient who did not believe me when I was telling her how self-critical she was. And so I said, I want you to write down everything you say to yourself in the course of a few days, bring it back, and we'll talk about it next week. And she came back the following week, and she looked down at the page that she was going to read to me, and she said, I can't read this. I am such a bully to myself. And they were things like, you made that mistake, you're so stupid, or God, you look terrible today, right? Just things like that you would never say to a friend, not because you're practicing idiot compassion, but because you actually wouldn't believe that. If your friend made that same mistake, you wouldn't think, she's an idiot. You wouldn't think that. You think, oh yeah, she made that mistake. Or if your friend looked the way you looked that day, you wouldn't think, oh my God, she's hideous. You wouldn't think that. It just wouldn't occur to you. And so I think that it's really important that we become aware of the stories that are going through our heads, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves about the people in our lives and what their motives are, because often we misattribute their motives, and then we react to this misattribution, and that gets us into a lot of trouble. I see that in couples all the time.
Why are we why do we judge ourselves so critically but not others? Like, why, when your patient came in and she looked at this list and she was horrified, what can we do to stop that judging? What can we do to change our narration? What can we do to get unstuck in our daily lives besides going to therapy? But, you know, what can we do that will help us?
Part of it is cultural. You know, I think that in our culture, we feel like if we self-flagellate, it motivates us, right? So it's like you have to be like hard on yourself. And that's the opposite of what is true. In reality, self-compassion makes you accountable to yourself. It's hard to be accountable when someone is beating you up, right? Like, you might do what this voice in your head is telling you to do, but it's not going to last for long. In the short term, you might get the task done. You might you know, not make that mistake again. But really what will help you not make that mistake again in the long term is if you're really compassionate with yourself. And people are so afraid to be kind to themselves because they believe that they won't hold themselves accountable, that they're not going to be held responsible. And you can hold yourself responsible for something and also be kind to yourself in the process. It's almost like, think of it as in a parenting way. What would you say to your child? Would you like scream at them and think that's going to help? Or would you be really kind about the mistake that they made, talk to them about it, and then maybe they would be more inclined to take responsibility for themselves?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That really makes a lot of sense. What are some of the differences between men and women and how they talk about their issues in therapy?
Yeah.
I bet you have more women than men in your office every day. I would think. Let me say that.
Yeah, well, you know, I see a lot of couples, and so I see a lot of men in that context too. But yeah, I see both. I do think it's true that women are more inclined to talk to people. And so the title of the book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, doesn't just mean maybe you should talk to a therapist. It means maybe we need to talk more to one another. And I do see that difference and as a gross generalization, I'll say that often men will come in and at some point they will say, once they're comfortable, they will say, I've never told anyone this before. And I sit back and I wait. And then what they tell me feels so mild. And I feel so much compassion for them because I feel like, wow, even if they have a great marriage and great family, great friends, they felt like they couldn't tell anyone. They couldn't be vulnerable in any way because that's the message men get. Women will come in and after they get comfortable with me, they might say, I've never told anyone this before. And then what they tell me, well, first of all, then they say, except for my mother, my sister, and my best friend, right? So they've told, but they say they've told no one. They've actually told maybe 1 to 3 people, but they feel like they haven't told anyone because to them, they've held it sort of close to their chest, right? And then what they tell me, it's sort of on a deeper level. Men are very deep if you let them go there. But the problem is that we don't let them go there. So in couples therapy, this is how it comes out. A woman will say to her husband, I really want to get to know you. I feel like you're not sharing your inner life with me. I feel like I can't really reach you, right? And so then he reveals himself to her eventually, and maybe he starts crying. Maybe he starts crying a lot. And she looks at me like deer in headlights. Like, what do I do with this? And what comes out in the conversation is that, A, she says that she didn't feel safe when he wasn't connecting with her, when he wasn't sharing himself with her. But B, she also doesn't feel safe when he's crying and breaking down in front of her, right? So it's a catch-22. What is he supposed to do? Either way, she feels unsafe. And so I think we need to change those messages about, what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is a sign of strength. It's a sign of, I am confident enough in our relationship and in myself to take the mask off, to reveal the truth of who I am. And so, otherwise what we're saying to men is we want you to pretend to be the rock, to pretend to be strong. And, and then we just say that men are emotionally stunted. Well, they're not. And they are so similar to women in terms of what they actually bring to me. What does it mean to be a parent, a partner, a son, a child? What does it mean to what does success mean? What does failure mean? What does it mean to be loved? What does it mean to be accepted? What does it mean to be understood? These are all very universal questions that people have. And I think we need to be extra careful to let men be people, be fully realized humans, and not make it seem like, well, only women are allowed to operate in that sphere of emotions.
Right, not label them. This is what a man thinks. This is what a woman thinks. We're more similar than. And from your book, I thought I picked up on that as well. Like, as different as the patients were, they had a lot of similarities too.
They did, yeah.
There's a question that's coming from the chat that looks good for right now, and it's about some women that are afraid that they need a therapist. They're afraid to talk to their partner and tell them that they need a therapist. What do you suggest a person can do to feel okay about themselves and begin therapy if they are feeling uncomfortable with their lives and they're nervous to even admit it to themselves, let alone their partner?
Yeah, there's this great story that the writer Andrew Solomon told when he gave a talk, and he wrote that great book on depression and called The Noonday Demon. And he was saying that he was giving a talk one time, and this man came up to him and confidentially said to him, I'm in therapy and I'm on antidepressants. And then this woman came up to him and basically said the same thing. And he realized they were married, and he said they were hiding the same medication in the same house, right?
Wow.
We would do that with like reflux medication, right? I mean, we would just be like, there's the reflux medication, right? So what is it about feeling like you need some help with your emotional health? And, this is what I was talking about at the beginning. I think the more we talk about it, the less of a stigma there is. And, I think that the reason that I wrote Maybe You Should Talk to Someone is I feel like there's so many misconceptions about what the human condition is like, what therapy is, what it isn't. It's not you go to therapy, you sit on a couch, you talk about your childhood ad nauseum, and you never leave. That's like the old, trope of therapy. And I think the other one is, that you come in, you download the problem of the week, you leave, you don't think about your therapy during the week, you go the next week, you download the problem of the week, and it's sort of this navel gazing kind of activity. Therapy is a very engaged rich human relationship that you have that helps you to see your life differently. I feel like therapy is almost like getting a really good second opinion on your life from someone who's not in your life. And that's the key. You have to get it from someone who's not in your life because there's no agenda. There's a vantage point that's different. And so I think if you, if you want to go to therapy, you tell your partner, I really want to understand myself better and I really want to feel better. And just like you would say, like, if you weren't feeling well, you go to your internist and say, I want to go get this checked out.
Yeah, you brought up stigma, and I feel like it's getting better. It's not as stigmatized to go to a therapist, but I don't know if we're there yet. I mean, I don't know if you could have written this book 10 years ago, but I think now it's getting better. Do you feel like it's less stigmatized? I know there's, a lot of children and teenagers and young adults, maybe because of the helicopter parenting or whatever, or social media, obviously, have much more anxiety and much more depression. My mom used to say, go play outside and come home for dinner. Like, we don't do that anymore. And I'm just wondering, all those outside sources, I feel like more kids and teens need therapy, but is there still a stigma? And then there's not enough therapists to go around at the same time.
Well, I think what's great about this generation is that they are really open about their feelings in a way that we maybe felt like we didn't have permission to be. Exactly. So that's one thing. But I think that the danger is with parents, with some parents who are, what we call overparenting, is that so a kid, we sort of almost try to talk our kids out of their feelings because we can't tolerate their discomfort. So it's one thing for kids to know how they feel. It's another for a parent to send the message that it's dangerous to have these kinds of feelings. An example of that is a kid will come to the parent and say, oh, this thing happened at lunch at school today and I'm so sad about it, or I'm, whatever. And the parent will say, oh, they'll either try to fix it for them and engineer it for them, or they'll say like, oh, don't be sad, it'll work out. Let's go have some ice cream, or let's go to Disneyland. Like they want them not to feel the sadness. It's okay that they feel the sadness. Or the kid will say like, I'm really worried about this, or I'm really anxious about this. And the parent will say like, oh, don't worry, it'll be okay. And then they try to distract them from it or talk them out of their feelings. And that's the problem, is because then kids grow up to be adults who can't access their own feelings. They don't know what they feel anymore. And they also feel like there are like negative feelings and positive feelings, right? There's no negative or positive feelings. Feelings are feelings. And kids don't realize that they're like weather systems. They blow in, they blow out. Sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's cloudy. There's no like negative weather system. It just is what it is. And so, what happens is kids try to numb their feelings out as adults. And so what do we do with the feelings as adults when we don't want to feel our feelings? Well, we, they come out in a short-temperedness, in insomnia, in obsessive sort of mindless scrolling through the internet, in too much food, in too much wine, whatever it is. But the thing is, numbness isn't an absence of feelings. Numbness is a sense of being overwhelmed by too many feelings. And if you try to suppress your feelings, they just get bigger. And so what we can do for our kids is we can use 3 really great words. And those words are, tell me more. So when your kid says to you, I'm really sad about this, check your own anxiety, check your own instincts to, save them from their sadness. They don't need to be saved from their sadness. They need to actually get practice feeling their sadness. And you say, tell me more. And the kid will tell you more. And they tell you more. And they will start to come up with solutions on their own, or they will learn how to just sit with a feeling and know that it's not going to be there forever.
I love that. Tell me more. I think you can use that in all parts of your life, with your spouse, with your friends, with your mother, with your children. I think that's awesome. So we're getting near the end of the interview. So I want to make sure everyone can get in on the chat and send any questions you have. I have a few more questions. I could stay here all night, but why are we so terrified of being happy? I know you said there's a word for it, cherophobia. Why are people so worried that too much joy is not so good? Why are people worried about that? Or
Yeah. So I write about that in the book, in the case of Rita, the woman with the estranged children. As she started to feel joy in her life, she would sabotage it, because joy wasn't something pleasant for her. Joy was almost like anticipatory pain, because in her history, every time she felt joy, something bad would happen. right? So maybe, oh, her mother was present and then her mother wasn't present, right? You know, she was married to this guy and it was great, and then it wasn't great. So for her, every time she thought, okay, I'm saved, I'm out of the woods, something bad would happen. I think that for many of us, what happens is we almost feel like we feel guilty about feeling joy. We also feel like we're worried that we're getting too big for our britches, right? That I think there's sort of a Jewish element to that, where I think sometimes we feel like there's almost like a hubristic element to it. Like, you know, I'm feeling this joy and I shouldn't feel this joy because I will get punished for my joy. I will get punished for having so much.
Why do people feel that they'll get punished though? Where does that come from?
I think it can come either from an individual family, like it did in Rita's case, or it can come from, you know, the culture you're surrounded by. And if the message you get growing up, and certainly the message that I think a lot of us got growing up when we were younger, you know, in synagogue, etc., was, you know, humility. And I think there's and humility I'm all for, but I think there's a difference between humility and not being able to feel your joy, right? So just because you feel joy doesn't mean that you're rubbing it in other people's faces. You can feel your joy without something bad happening to you. It's like the piano's not going to fall from the sky because something good happened to you.
Okay, I want to talk for a second about your Dear Therapist column that you write in The Atlantic. What's the difference with how you talk to people in therapy versus that column, and how did the column come about?
Yeah. So the column comes out in The Atlantic every Monday, and it's kind of a non-advice advice column. And what I mean by that is I don't mean to say it's not useful, because I hope it is. It's more that instead of saying, you know, oh, here's what you should say to your mother-in-law, it's a little less prescriptive than that. It's more about, when we go back to stories and the stories we tell ourselves, it's helping people to see the part of the story that they're not seeing when they write in with whatever their issue is. And so it's really sort of broadening people's perspective so that it applies to most readers and not just the person who wrote the letter. And also so that it will help people, the person who wrote the letter and the readers, think about something in their life for the longer term and not just the immediate problem, although it is helpful for the immediate problem. And, you know, in the column, it's different from what I do in the therapy room, because in the therapy room, I have a long-term relationship with somebody. If I forgot to say something, or I think I might have done something differently, or I want to wait because the timing isn't right, and I know that I need to give it a little more time before I say the thing that I want to say, I can do that in therapy. There's another week I can do that. In the column, you get one shot, and you kind of have to figure out, how do I say the thing that I really want them to hear, even though they might not be ready for it, in a way that won't feel threatening to them so they can hear it. So
And
it's a little more challenging.
Right. I think it's also good for the readers, because they might have had that question and you're trying to help, like you said, that one person plus the readers of The Atlantic in the broad sense.
Right. And I think what's great, you know, in the upcoming podcast that I have, which is called Dear Therapist, because it's me and it's Guy Winch, who you might also know from his TED Talks. And what we're doing is he's the advice columnist for TED, and I'm the advice columnist for The Atlantic, and we're coming together to kind of show people what a consult would look like. And so people, you know, you hear people, they come in, they read their letter, and we bring it to each other the way therapists consult with each other. And we say, you know, here's what we think. We talk to the person. You hear us having the conversation with the letter writer. And then what's different is that, unlike in our columns, where you don't get to find out what happened after we give the advice, they tell us what happened. And so I think that people learn a lot from what worked and what didn't work. And so there's that extra sort of like that very satisfying piece at the end of, you know, where did the story go?
Right. When is that coming out? When is your podcast coming out? I think we're all we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be out. It's with iHeart, and Katie Couric's producing it, and it will be out at the end of July.
Oh, awesome. Very soon. Are there certain traits that you noticed in people that make you more invested in their treatment? Certain patients have a certain something? Or when do you feel kind of bored by a patient? I know that sounds terrible to say, but.
Yeah, when I remember that when I was training, a supervisor said, because we were all wondering about that, I think when you're a new therapist, you know, what happens if I don't like a patient? Or what happens if I my mind is drifting, or that kind of thing. And the supervisor said something very wise. She said, there's something likable in everyone. It's your job to find it. And we all thought, yeah, well, we all know people we don't like, so how true can that be? But it actually is absolutely true if they let me get to know them. And so I think that's the caveat, which is that I think that sometimes, in the beginning, I think we all, there's a performative aspect to therapy. I don't mean that people are intentionally performing, but I think that just social convention is that you want people to like you. And maybe it's later on when you feel more comfortable in the relationship, when you're going to really kind of peel the onion and go there. And I think that when people don't do that, when people are sort of telling you a story and they go off on tangent after tangent after tangent, and you try to focus them and they're really hiding from you and they won't let you in at all, I think that becomes boring, but you address it in the room. It's not like I'm sitting there doing my market list, while there's, like I'm actually even more engaged at that moment because I need to really try to find a way in. I was a competitive chess player when I was a teenager. And I think therapy is a lot like that, where you're kind of thinking about, if I can't get in this way, I need to figure out another strategy. I need to go in a different way, and they're going to make this move, and I wasn't expecting that move, so now I have to make a completely different move.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we have to get to the TV series on your book. We're all very excited about that, and I want to know how that happened. Eva Longoria, are you going to be on the set? Are you going to have a lot to do with the show? Like, we want to hear all the behind the scenes stuff about the TV series.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of behind the scenes because it's being written right now. So I'm a producer on the show. And so I consult on the show when, questions arise and things come up. And it's being worked out right now. So we haven't been on set. Coronavirus has slowed pretty much everything down, particularly production. So we're still in the writing phase.
When is it well, you don't even know when it's going to be out because of Corona, correct?
Well, now we don't know. Right. Yeah.
There's a question from the Zoom about what advice can you give us to get through COVID? I mean, we've been through the first part. Now it's summer and everything's opening up, but then we're hearing higher numbers again, and people are very worried. And then they say in the fall and winter, it might come again. So what can we do? What are 3 takeaways that every woman on this call can take with them that they can do to help themselves, their families, their friends get through it?
Yeah. Well, I would say the first one I talked about, which was the both and make sure you're looking at the both and of the situation. I think that and I should say too, I'm seeing all of my therapy clients through, on the equivalent of Zoom, and which is very different. And a lot of people, because they have other people in the house, they want privacy. And I'm doing a lot of these sessions from people's toilet seats. They have the toilet seat down.
Wow.
And that's where they're sitting, because they had to go to the bathroom just to find a really, private place to talk, or their closet or the car or whatever it is. And there's a lot of, humor, I think, that happens even in the midst of this. And I had this experience with this woman where she was talking about her mother is in a nursing home, and there was a case of COVID in the nursing home, and she was very afraid that her mother was going to get it and her mother was going to die, and she lived in another state, and it was very scary. And she was crying about this, and she was sitting on the toilet, and she leaned back and she accidentally flushed the toilet. And it was this very it was just surreal and funny, even though what she was talking about was of course not. And I was very afraid to smile or, at all in that moment. And she said, am I the only person who, does therapy from the toilet? And I said, no, the toilet has become the new couch. And she laughed. And because I immediately regretted that I had said that. And she laughed. And at the end of our session, she said, I was really grateful for what we talked about, but what helped me the most this hour was laughing with you. And she said, it reminded me of what it was like, what myself was like, what it was like to be human before this happened. And it reminded me that I will be that way again. And so I think that we feel like so much of what makes us human has been stripped from us during this time. And yet so much of it hasn't, right? We still can laugh. We still can love. We still can experience joy. All of those things are still there. So it's all of the things that you have to look, I think, for the things that still make you feel like yourself. and make sure that you're not ignoring those things. So that's number one. Number two, I would say really watch out when we talk about the language that we use when we're talking about what's going on. Sorry, things are popping on my screen. Sorry.
It's okay. We're all used to Zoom.
So I think that so one thing that we talk about is we use the word isolation. We're physically distant. We can connect with anybody we want, right? We just can't physically be in the same space with them. Isolation implies that we're sitting in a prison cell in solitary confinement with no lights, no food, no anything, and we have no contact with any other humans. So I think we need to remember that we actually do. I think another thing is when we talk about anxiety, we get so, like that's a horrible thing. Actually, there are two kinds of anxiety. There's productive anxiety and unproductive anxiety. Productive anxiety is when you have a reasonable response to something. You're reasonably worried about something, and it helps you to be safe. So an example is, if something makes you feel worried in real life, you say, okay, wait a minute, this is a warning sign. This is an alarm bell. I need to address this. If you ignore it, you might be in danger. During COVID, we're reasonably worried about getting the coronavirus. So what do? We distance ourselves, we wash our hands, we wear masks, we do all those things, right? That's a productive use of your anxiety. Unproductive anxiety, on the other hand, is what a lot of us are doing. It's obsessive rumination. It's futurizing, catastrophizing. It's worrying about things that haven't happened yet and may never happen, right? So, and it's checking the headlines every hour. It's really just all corona all the time. That's not helping you to take action to do anything different. You're already doing everything you need to do to stay safe. You're already doing it with the productive anxiety. So with the unproductive anxiety, what can you do instead? Can you do something to bolster your psychological immune system? So you're worried about your physical immune system, but you want to bolster your psychological immune system. So can you read a book? Can you take a walk? Can you call a friend? What can you do to bolster your psychological immune system instead of wearing it down with all of that unproductive anxiety? And I would say that the last thing, you asked for 3, is about this thing about uncertainty, where I feel like humans don't do well with uncertainty. We like to know how the story goes. And what we usually do with uncertainty is we fill in the unknowable part with something negative. And that's not helpful. So it's important to say, I'm going to stay in the present instead of time drifting into some kind of, the uncertainty and filling in the story with some horrible thing that's going to happen. And I'm going to stay very grounded in the present.
Yeah, it's hard to do that, but I think those are 3 amazing takeaways. Okay, I have one last question about your Jewish experience. And do you think being a Jewish woman shaped you into the career you have today? I know you've had many careers along the way, a writer and medical school and TV writer, but now you're obviously an author and a therapist full time. But did your Judaism shape you to get where you are today?
I think it couldn't have not shaped me, right? I think we're all shaped by our upbringings and our cultures and our communities. I think a few of the things that I think are very present in my life that came from my Jewish identity have to do with community, first of all. Community is really important to me and my family. And that's something that my son hates. It's a joke in our house. He's like, community, community, community. Because I say that, he says it like lovingly, but it's funny because I really emphasize community and having lots of your hands in lots of different communities, and not only for your own benefit, but how can we help those communities, right? And so I think during, like, for example, what my son is doing now is during the coronavirus, he is, through the Righteous Conversations Project, he is paired with a Holocaust survivor, and they pair teens with Holocaust survivors, and they call them every week, and they have these beautiful long conversations, just because a lot of the elderly population can't get out right now. It's not safe for them to go out. And so can these teenagers bring some community, bring some company, bring some joy to their lives? And my son is getting as much out of it as I think the person that he's paired with is. In fact, my son's probably getting more out of it. And it's just a lovely relationship that they formed over these past, few months. And because my son's grandfather, my father, died a few months ago, this has been a really interesting experience for my son to have this sort of grandfather figure that he talks to. So I think that when we give to community, we get as much back. And I think that's something that was very much taught to me as I was growing up in my Jewish community. And I also think, when we talk about purpose, you talked about my different careers. I feel like all of my different careers were really about story in the human condition. And a lot of people, I think on the outside would say, why are you changing careers again? Or this doesn't make sense. And I think really listening and going into that place of knowing and feeling your own sense of purpose in the world and what you want to do and who you want to be in the world was something else that I think also came from that. And I remember during, when my son was going through his bar mitzvah about a year and a half ago, I remember just the way that all his bar mitzvah tutors and his rabbis and the community were talking to him about who he was going to be and how he was shaping his life and taking responsibility for your life. Those were all things that it was like a deja vu. I remembered all of that growing up as well.
That's really beautiful. And we love our community here. And now you are an honorary member of our community. So thank you so much. I mean, I could stay here for hours and I'm sure everyone on the call could too, but our time is up and we loved talking to you and we'll look forward to your podcast next month and your TV series soon. And thank you so much. It was very enlightening and we really appreciate it.
Oh, it was such a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you so much. Everyone can clap. And now I want to, if you want to stay on, you're welcome. We're talking about a really amazing initiative in our community. We have a very exciting update from Jessica Zaks, who started right here in our community that is going national. Jessica, your turn. She just needs to be unmuted.
I am unmuted, correct? First of all, thank you, Dana. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, my daughter. Our daughter, who's a therapist, actually recommended that I read the book. So I have to thank her for that. So I had read the book prior to today. So that was wonderful. So I want to just talk very shortly about the community initiative that has started in Hartford with the Women of Impact program called Dignity Grows. I'm hoping that most of you have heard about this already. It started over a year ago when Linda Levin and I watched a documentary called Period End of Sentence about period poverty in India, which is how women in India still have to go live in huts when they have their period because there's no menstrual products for them. So I was fascinated and saddened by that documentary. And I started doing some research to find out that in America, 20% of American women suffer from period poverty, which means 1 in 5 American women cannot afford menstrual supplies, which greatly impacts every part of their lives. Missing school, missing work, and most women who experience period poverty are hourly wage earners. So no work, no pay. It interrupts social life. It interrupts religious involvement. So it is a really horrible way for people to live. And it's also very often coupled with food insecurity. So we started out as a one-night project. We said, let's do something. And we literally had a grassroots event in Hartford at Linda's house. It was amazing how many women came. Women brought supplies. We had zipper top totes. So everybody who receives our totes, our packs, are able to bring them home and no one knows what's in them. And we packed 100 and something dignity packs for women in need, our neighbors in need. We had no idea who they are. And since then, we keep on joking that Hartford, we do things big. And this project's really become a beast and it has an entire life of its own. We, as I said, we are called Dignity Grows. We have already packed prior to COVID. We have packed in in excess of 2,000 dignity packs that have been given out already, being given out all over. We did a special request for money for COVID relief. We have raised, just from a simple Instagram post, we've raised in excess of $3,000 for another pack that we're going to be doing. Everything we're doing is grassroots. And what the most exciting thing is that National Women's Philanthropy wants to help make this a national initiative for the entire NWP across the country. So it's really been amazing. And the best part of it is we have no idea who we're helping. We give out our totes, we give out our packs at food pantries, the kosher food pantry plus college food pantries, the Boys and Girls Club in Hartford, Compass Youth in Hartford, Charter Oak Cultural Center, the Gay and Lesbian Health Initiative downtown, the public library. So what we're really doing is helping those in need and those that we will never meet, which is the highest form of tzedakah. And now with COVID, as we say, we've learned so many new people who need our help. The elderly, through JFS, the elderly are receiving our bags. We've taken out the feminine supplies from them because the elderly do not need them. And every month, people are able to get full-size shampoo, deodorant, body soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, and a month's supply of sanitary pads and also Tampax. And the most amazing part of this project is that it costs $10 to fill one of these packs. That's it. So for $10, people receive a logoed bag with the Federation name on it and the Dignity Grows logo. And for $10, we are impacting individuals' lives for an entire month. We're changing their feeling about themselves in time of need. So we should be proud as a Hartford community because, as we said, we're really working on this to go national. And it is a hands-on project, which is also something that really has resonated with the women in our community because of how we get together. Women that we've never met before get in a room and pack these bags. Every bag now is the same. Nothing looks different than any other bag. And our partner agencies come, our recipients come, their agencies come and they pick up the bags and they distribute them. And we're hoping some of you would like to help. So as a Federation project, it's a really easy thing to do. We have a Venmo account at Dignity Grows. It's $10 per tote to fill. So it's an easy thing to really help somebody, or a check to Federation that's earmarked for Dignity Grows. It's a great thing. And we hope that all of you will get involved, and that over the year, when we're not socially distanced and we start doing more and more packs, that you'll join us or host one yourself, which we'll help you put together. So that's it. And now I'd like to introduce Carolyn.
Hi, everyone.
The wonderful Carolyn, our chairwoman of the board. So thank you very much, Carolyn.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. Jessica, I'm so happy you had the opportunity to share with everybody on this call. What Jessica doesn't do is well, let me rephrase that. Jessica is so humble about this project, and she is the founder. And what she doesn't do is really just share with you that this is being embraced nationally. That is huge. A seed idea in Jessica's mind is now something that is impacting women in need, not only in Greater Hartford, but all over the country. And for that, we should be so proud. And thank you, Jessica. And I get the good job of the night. All I do is I have to thank people and talk to you a little bit about something. So don't hang up yet. It'll be 1 minute. But I think our speaker, Lori Gottlieb, hung up already, but she did such an incredible job. I was enamored the whole time. And Dana, beautiful job interviewing her. You know, everybody give Dana a round of applause. This is not her profession. And I really honestly thought I was sitting there watching two friends having a conversation, honestly. I didn't even think about what I had to say right now because I was just like this, listening to Dana interview Lori. It was spectacular, Dana, honestly. You can just be our interviewer from now on. Who needs some of the other people we get? But Lori Gottlieb said something that struck me at the very end when she talked about her Jewish values. And she said, when you give to the community, you get as much back. And I thought that was the perfect segue into how I wanted to end this, because we are at the end of an annual campaign, and we all know that there are such great needs in our community. And if we didn't give to the annual campaign, we wouldn't be able to help all the people we help. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the campaign, each year we raise over $4 million to fund a wide range of Jewish programs and services here in Hartford and in Israel and around the world. And I know David touched on a little bit, the campaign supports everything from therapy for children, families, and seniors at Jewish Family Services, to the fantastic programming at the Mandel JCC, and to humanitarian aid like food and heat for impoverished Jews in the former Soviet Union. But as David also mentioned, during emergencies like COVID-19, your campaign helps us to pivot quickly and to serve the people in need right here in our community. And let me tell you, there are a lot of needs. Just in the last few months with COVID, we have partnered with the Kosher Food Pantry and did kosher food delivery, financial assistance, dignity packs, and so much more. Many of us on this call are so blessed, but there are many who aren't, and we really impact their lives. And I want you to all know that we should be so grateful for that. So if you haven't made a gift to the 2020 campaign, I would ask you to do so. It's only going to help somebody in our community and somewhere around the world very, very much. And it is a mitzvah to do this. And before I end, I just want you to know I'm gonna pivot back to Lori Gottlieb. She talked about, don't get to the emotional heart attack, and we should all think about getting therapy. So if you aren't getting therapy and you need therapy, but another best thing is to have a pet. Oops. So hug your pets, hug your children, and everyone, remember, it's a good thing to stay emotionally healthy. It really is. This one helps me. But I want you to all know, I hope you stay safe, you stay healthy. I hope this night was enlightening for you. Before I end, I really would like to thank Judy Schlossberg, our Women's Philanthropy Chair. I would also like to thank Rabbi Garber, who I think she might have just hung up. And of course, David, our CEO. And of course, Lori Mandel, Donna Wilbur, Bill Baronis, Susanna McNeil, Ali Egan-Sherry, and Sam Schoenberg. What you guys don't know what goes behind the scenes is there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and we couldn't do any of it without all of them. So thank you so much. If any of you have any questions about the annual campaign, you can always reach out to me or Dana or anybody at the Federation. We're always happy to help. And have a wonderful, healthy rest of your summer. And I can't wait till we get together again soon. Everybody can